When he read it, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Twist basically told him everything. He got spooked and spilled his guts. He told them that he was collecting the money for me and Athomi. He told them that Conejo had dropped off a couple ounces of methamphetamine as a form of payment. They found this dope as well. He told them that my girl knew all about the details and that he had met her on several occasions to drop off money. He told them that Athomi told him that I had already deemed Conejo no good, and that was the gist of it. I knew Athomi well enough to read the expression on his face. That was the whole purpose for me turning the phone, so I could see him. It was a look of disappointment, disbelief, shame, and fear for what was going to happen to Twist. I knew that Twist had his ear to his door as well, so although I wanted to say a number of different things, I just held back and played this like I wasn't tripping. Now I'm just going to say this, after looking into this further and dialoguing with Athomi and Pony about it, they both eventually conceded that police reports don't lie and that Twist had to have said something. But the main part of this that I want you guys to understand is this. Pony, Roger, and Twist all made statements against me, statements that incriminated me and put me in a precarious position with regards to the criminal cases I was facing. And nobody seemed to care or say anything about it. And there was black and white paperwork that confirmed it and put them on blast. Later on, when people were just speculating about what they thought I was doing, it was epic, groundbreaking. The lynch squads came out and they were ready to do a public execution. People didn't even want to give me the benefit of the doubt. And I'm not trying to play a victim, I'm just being real, man. It always seems like when a leader or someone with a lot of status falls into a situation where he's in question, people are quick to pounce and look for a reason to turn on him. It's the drama factor. What it really is the higher you get, the more people want to see you fall. This would definitely weigh on me later, and it was something I couldn't understand. But you guys are going to see later that despite all the favoritism and the bias that I was up against, I still stayed loyal and held my bearings. Roger, on the other hand, was a good tattoo artist, probably one of the best, if not the best, in the San Jose area. That was something that was widely known amongst a lot of the homeboys. And after Roger bailed out and was still fighting this case with the rest of us, a lot of homeboys continued to go by his house to get work done, knowing that he had made statements against an active NF member. What the fuck's up with that? They still went by his crib to get tattoos, and they just turned a blind eye to it. Then Pony made statements about me that were also documented in police reports, but it was just waved off and people acted like they just didn't care. Man, I couldn't understand it. Finally, these police reports came out on Twist, and people had the audacity to insult my intelligence by saying that the police reports weren't accurate and that these cops basically fabricated them. Come on, man. I couldn't believe this shit. I couldn't believe that people were taking the positions that they did and that nobody was pushing for any of their heads. At the time, when all these things were surfacing, I was still running the jail and could have had all these cats hit. But let me tell you guys why I didn't. For one, I was trying to give everyone their due process and the benefit of the doubt. That's how I was schooled, and that's what you're supposed to do. Even in the gravest of circumstances, you're supposed to give everyone their due process, the same consideration that you would expect yourself. That's the rule of thumb. Not only that, but in cases like this, where there's multiple people involved, the last thing you want to do is to start hitting people and possibly create more witnesses against you. So, you just let things play out. You let the cards fall where they will, and then you deal with the trash when it's all over and done with. You take notes, act like you don't know, and then you punish them fools when the time is right. To wrap this part up about Twist, he knew he fucked up. He begged me back there not to deem him, and he cried on the tier, asking us not to make him go to PC. Athomi and Pony had the nerve to ask me to enter into a pact with them to destroy all the police reports and to basically keep it amongst us. Can you believe that? I'm serious, man. I can't make this shit up. I felt bad because Twist was helping me and he got caught up for it. But at the same time, he knew what he was getting himself into, and I just couldn't get past the fact that he involved my girl the way he did. Sometime a little over 2 years after I hit the Santa Clara County Jail, we basically started anticipating that we were going to either get hit with the federal or state indictment. Police reports were surfacing everywhere within the jail, and it seemed like my name was in every last one of them. Law enforcement acted like I was responsible for every criminal act, every assault, and every murder that took place in the county of Santa Clara. Shit, I knew I was gonna get washed up just based on their perception of me. So not long after Athomi and Twist caught their cases, they dropped the hammer on all of us. Early one morning, sometime around the summer of 2005, I knew something was going on because they slammed the whole jail down and all the floor officers were acting suspicious. After the nurse came in and did her morning walk, they called all of us to court, one by one. They pulled us all out one at a time and escorted us through the court tunnels of court. They slammed the entire jail down and made a big spectacle out of our court appearance. Even our co-defendants in the new jail were walked one by one under escort. They tried to be all dramatic about it, and they definitely blew it up. Once we got into the courtroom and we all spoke to our attorneys, they started reading off all the charges, and basically the judge articulated the details of our case. For me, I knew I was in so much trouble that I was really only paying half attention to what they were saying in there. Most of my focus was on communicating with the other homies and just talking to everyone who I hadn't seen in a while. It was more routine than anything. But then I heard the judge mention something that made a light bulb go off in my head and made me realize that I had carelessly overlooked something that I should have been on top of from the time that it happened. The judge mentioned that they were using close to 1,800 phone calls against us. He also said that our attorneys were going to have to file motions allowing us to get court-ordered iPods in the jail so that we could listen to all the phone calls and interviews. I started thinking, phone calls, wait a minute. What about the phone calls that I made to my mom and Vicky when I had first come into the jail almost 2 years ago? Were they going to use them? I said to myself, nah. Why would they? They're not relevant to the case. And these were just private calls where I was unhinged and talking nonsense to my family. Besides that, they were nothing that was ever acted on. So why would they use them? But the more I thought about it, the more concerned I got. What if I was mistaken? What if they did include them? What if they did include them? And what if they included all our phone calls, personal calls included? These weren't the kind of calls that I would want just popping up out of nowhere without some type of advance notice. Talking like a degenerate was something that I shouldn't take lightly, because what if those calls were taken out of context? And what if they were released without the benefit of me giving an explanation? Me being honest and forthright about them would take away any of the shock or surprise value that would come from just finding out with no warning themselves. Why shouldn't I anyways? I didn't have nothing to hide. I decided the best thing for me to do was to tell my attorney to get me an iPod ASAP and that this was of major concern. I told him, look man, I don't care about anything else. I need you to get me an iPod and get all my phone calls downloaded now. I couldn't wait. This was urgent. He sensed the urgency and said, why? What's going on? Is there something you're concerned about? I said, absolutely. Within 2 days, he was back up at the jail and pulling me out for an attorney interview. He handed me the iPod, my court order, all my transcripts from the grand jury hearing, and then he showed me how to use the iPod. This was back in 2004, so iPods were still new, and I honestly didn't know how to operate it back then. The grand jury transcripts were priceless. They were from all the testimony that was provided against us from any and all the informants and anyone else that was called in to testify in front of the grand jury that indicted us. At the time, nobody even knew who the informant was or who it was that was snitching on us. Grand jury hearings are always done in secrecy. The only ones that know about them is the prosecuting DA, the judge, and the jury. That's it. The fellas were definitely waiting just like I was to read these transcripts. We all wanted the lowdown. I knew I was going to be reading them over the tier to the others for the rest of the day because I was the first one to get my paperwork. But unbeknownst to anybody but me and now my attorney, I didn't care about the transcripts as much as I did the iPod. I wanted to know what calls they were using, whether they were on the iPod or not. I felt the best thing for me to do is to get at the other homies that were back there with me and to just basically let them know what was on my phone calls and the reason why I said the things that I did. I had to implement some damage control. Everyone who was indicted with me, all 12 of them, will be getting copies of everything as well. As soon as I walked back onto the tier and was being escorted back to my cell, Athomi, Pony, and Sykes were all on their windows, and they all said, "Damn, it's all bad." They seen the stack of transcripts and all the other legal documents I was carrying. All three couldn't wait to hear who was telling on us. Once the CO left the tier, I told the homies to give me a few minutes to get situated, and I started reading them some of the transcripts. But the truth really was, I didn't need to get situated at all. I was just going through the iPod and spinning through it just to see what calls I could find. Keep in mind, it had been 2 years since I made those calls, so I was literally going through hundreds and hundreds of calls. Not just mine, but everybody's. And there was 12 of us. I remember Athomi saying, "Hey B, don't be listening to me cupcake on the phone to my girl." The other two laughed, but Sykes said the same thing. He said, "Yeah B, let's agree that personal cupcake phone calls are private." He was half joking, but I knew that there was also a level of sincerity in his voice, because nobody wants you to listen to you talk to your girl in some of your most intimate and private moments. I didn't either. As I continued to spin through the calls, my heart sank when I realized that I had finally found one. Then 2, then 3, then 4. Before I realized it, it was clear that every single call that I had made since I had been in that county jail were included in the recordings. As I listened to more and more of the calls, I tried to listen to the calls as if I was someone else, as if I was someone impartial. And then I asked myself what I would have honestly thought. And there was no denying the fact that I kept saying the same thing. I sounded like a fucking degenerate. All I could do was tell the truth and just be honest about why I had spoken like that. I knew it was going to be an uphill battle trying to explain myself, but there was no other alternative. What the fuck was I thinking? Would I get the benefit of the doubt? Who knows, but there was no other options. Checking out never even crossed my mind. If things started going bad, that just wasn't in my DNA. I'd make them kill me before I'd ever stoop that low. If things went bad, then they just have to hit me. But I was getting ahead of myself. Why was I thinking about getting hit? I never talked to anyone. I never threw anyone under the bus, and surely I get the same kind of consideration as the others, like Twist, Pony, and some of the others. Them cats all had paperwork on them, black and white, that couldn't be argued away. With me, all that existed was the phone calls, where I alluded to cooperating. That was it. There wasn't any police reports or anything like that, because it never went any further than just the conversations I had. For the next couple of hours, I went through all the transcripts and read them the critical portions just so they knew what we were all up against. Basically, there was only one person snitching on us, Conejo. He was the only civilian besides law enforcement that testified against us. And he connected all the dots and weaved us all together into one big web. He told them everything. Once I had finished going through all the transcripts and we spent the next hour or two dissecting all the testimony, I got back to the business of listening to these 10 to 15 calls over and over. What the fuck was I thinking, man? That's all I kept asking myself. Disappointment in myself was a grave understatement. I fucking knew better, but yet I took a double-barrel shotgun and blew off my own foot. Because I was an NF member and knew better, I'd surely be held to a higher standard. But the one thing I had going for me, or at least I thought I had going, was that there was no police reports. None. Zero. Nada. Nil. Not a single piece of paper showing that I had ever crossed that line or that I had ever went forward with the things I had talked about. It was simply just the calls by themselves. Would this be enough? If the standard that I was going to be held to was just based on the fact that I said the things that I said, regardless to whether or not I followed through with it, then I guess I was done. But that's almost unreasonable. Come on, I'm going to be terminated and taken out the game after all these years for that? The conversations I had with my stepfather should give credence to this as well. They should at least prove that my mind was still in the right place. Because I had told him several times that I couldn't really do what I was telling my mom and Vicky. That I had to tell them this because they didn't understand my lifestyle. But I was wrong. Later, all my efforts to mount any form of damage control fell on deaf ears. Well, it actually didn't fall on deaf ears. Let me just say that I was sabotaged and that it wasn't truly going to be judged on those merits. You guys will understand what happened later, but I guess in all actuality, I was initially given the benefit of the doubt. However, when you have NF members within the organization sending deceptive or misleading filters out about other members, their status, or bogus details with regards to information, that's how people get hurt and crossed up. At any rate, I handled the situation with integrity, and I handled it to the best of my ability. I didn't lie about it, fabricate my position, or try to spin it into something that it wasn't. I was forthright about everything they'd hear in my calls, and I let them know my reasoning for talking the way that I did. All I could do was be honest, and that's what I did. But this wasn't me addressing the judge and executioner. These guys were all NR members and wouldn't have anything to do with passing sentence on me. Well, at least Pony and Otomi were just NR members. Sykes was a new C and just didn't have the say-so to even speak on this situation. At most, they were conduits, relays that would facilitate the details and the crux of what was happening to NF leadership. At the time, they were all being housed in the Glenn McGuire Federal Detention Facility in Oakland, California. I even suggested that the right thing for me to do under the circumstances was to just step back and relinquish my position until the investigation passed or until word came back from the generals with regards to my status. The consensus back there initially was for me not to trip on it, that it was above their heads, and that if I never gave any formal interviews that I had nothing to worry about. For the most part I agreed. However, where we differed in opinion was how it might be perceived by NF leadership that I had even spoken like this, period. Whether I followed through or not was another thing, but in my opinion, what I had to get past was why I even spoke like this in the first place. That was my dilemma. Regardless of my girl's health conditions or not, it wouldn't go over well that I had even compromised my morals, my values, and my integrity the way I did. When I finished drafting up the kite, I shot it down to Pony first. Then I told him to make sure that the other two also seen it. As they sent it back and forth amongst each other, I continued to listen to the calls over and over. I probably listened to them at least 100 times each, almost to the point that I could memorize them. In fact, over the next 3 or 4 weeks, that's all I continued to do over and over. Although my offer to step down was initially waved off and they insisted that I just continue to maintain my position, I wanted to follow the same type of protocol that I would have implemented if it would have been another C. So I stepped down and refused to continue leading anyway. Honestly, I'm not even sure if they took on the responsibilities of overseeing the jail collectively together or if one of them was delegated by the other two. I wouldn't be around long enough to find out, and this is why. So over the next few weeks, all I did was continue to listen to these calls over and over. The more I listened to them, the more frustrated I got with myself. It got to the point where I became miserable. And like they say, misery loves company. I was in my cell miserable while these guys were on the tier joking and acting like they had nothing to worry about. Eventually one day I shot Pony a kite telling him what I thought about the whole situation, and I just got some things off my chest. I told him that he sounded like a little schoolgirl back there giggling and laughing like he had nothing to worry about. I reminded him that his hands were just as dirty as mine. I took it a step further by threatening him and telling him that I was personally going to make sure that he got what was coming to him. I told him the next time we go to court and they put us all in the same court tape together to just know what to expect. I said, all my dirt's out there. It's all out in the street, and I'll take what I got coming either way. But what about you? Are you ready? Pony's not an aggressive guy. It's not a mystery that he was scared of me. I used to have him dropping tears in my living room when I'd be reprimanding him for either being late, for not listening, or for some other type of idiotic infatuation that he would or would not do out there. Now here's where things got funny. Like I already said, none of these guys had the authority to deem me or pass sentence on me. But they must have either been communicating with the NF generals or they had already got directives from them. I say this because of what happened next. After I threatened Pony, the tier went silent. Nobody spoke openly on the tier for the rest of the day. Instead, they started shooting each other lines, fish lines, to communicate discreetly. This is how it was for the rest of the day. And the loyalty lines were drawn. It was the three of them against me. That much was clear. And when it happened, I was like, okay, this is how it all starts. I already know how the game goes. So later on that evening, the next watch came on. They started running showers. I was the shower cleaner, so I always showered last. The shower was at the front of the tier on the other side of Pony's cell, and it was literally the size of a hall closet. So here's the way the tier was set up. It was the shower, then Pony's cell, then Athomi's cell, then my cell, and then Psych's cell was the last cell. As soon as they started running showers, Pony asked the floor officer if he could use the phone. As soon as he asked for it, I already knew what he was up to. Pony never used the phone. The bum didn't have anyone to call. The whole purpose he asked for the phone was to get his tray slot open. This way he could either try to spear me, slice me, or do something else through the open tray slot when I walked by. As soon as I heard him ask for it, I honestly thought to myself, okay, Pony's finally gonna let his nuts swing and show some heart. Even though I was supposed to be the intended target, I still felt a level of praise knowing that he was gonna at least try to do something. Athomi was the first one to shower. He went out without incident. But as he was waiting to be escorted back to his cell, I watched Pony from the side of my front window trying to demonstrate something to Athomi when he was in the shower. Like I said, the phone was on a heavy roll cart, so at first I couldn't understand what he was trying to do. Just like the one in this picture below. Pony didn't have any real in-depth schooling, let alone schooling on weaponry or tier warfare. But once I realized what he was planning on doing, my feelings of praise turned into disappointment. This fool was rocking the phone back and forth from front to back, which meant he was going to try to tip the phone over on the tier in front of me. I was hoping I was wrong because that was a pathetic way to try to move on someone. But unfortunately, I had a feeling I wasn't wrong. Sykes went out next and he shot by my cell without so much as even a glance. After he was done showering, Pony went through the same motions of demonstrating his little idea with the phone. Just then, the front gate opened up and the CO came in to do the next shower change. It was that time. Sykes walked by again without any acknowledgement. I just looked at him and said to myself, "You little piece of shit, fuck you then. Fuck it, let it be on then." When the CO came to my door, I took one last look in the direction of Pony's cell, turned around, cuffed up, then my door was open. The first thing I seen was Pony bending down with his little beady eyes looking through his tray slot, holding both sides of the phone. When I got within 2 or 3 feet of his cell, he lunged forward and pushed the phone as hard as he could so that the whole phone card fell over on the tier. As soon as he did it, I stepped to his window, looked him dead in his eyes, said a few choice words, and that was basically it. That was the first incident that details my first removal, if that's what you want to call it. I'm not trying to be funny about it, but on the reals, I was embarrassed for him, as that's just not the way that you earn your bones. At any rate, this little spectacle that he put on in front of the floor officer managed to serve yet a bigger purpose, so I'm sure this was his main objective anyway. It was to do it in front of the CO and to basically put them on notice that we had issues back there. Then they moved me, which they did, and that's exactly what they did. After that incident, they walked me back over to 2nd East and moved me right back to the same observation cell that I was housed in when I first landed in the jail. There was no question about the fact that I was upset about the PC move Pony did in front of the CO, but it still didn't shake my resolve and didn't put me in the mindset of questioning my loyalty. The way I was looking at it at the time was I was still active, that was just a temporary test of my loyalty, and that I just had to be patient until all the facts started coming out. I'm sure people in my situation probably would have checked out and might have let this situation discourage them, but my head was still in the right place. I'm being as detailed about this as I can because I want you guys to put yourselves in the moment and ask yourselves what you would have done if it would have been you that would have been in that situation. Seriously, tell me what you guys would have done differently, if anything, and be honest with yourselves. I really want to know if there's things other people might have done that would have been different from what I did. So when I got moved back to the observation cell that night, the first thing I did, like I always did whenever I moved to a new cell, is clean it from top to bottom. That's just always been a normal part of the routine for me. As I was cleaning the cell that night, the officer that was working right outside my door popped open my tray slot and tried to hand me a new shirt. When I looked over at him and seen what he was doing, I said, "What's that for?" He said, "It's your new top. Classification said to give it to you." I said, "Oh no, you're not. Get that out of here, man. That's not even coming in my cell." The reason I got upset because the top he tried to hand me was a brown top, and in that jail, brown represented protective custody. I had been in double red since I had first got to that jail, and there was no reason to change my classification status now. Not because this clown tried throwing a phone card at me. I told the CO, "Tell classification I said to come up here and talk to me, because I'm telling you right now, I ain't wearing that top." Later that night, classification came up and talked to me at my door, but they really didn't resolve the issue. I explained that they didn't have any justification that would warrant them making a drastic move like that. That putting me in PC based on what had happened earlier was bullshit. I went on to tell them that the other 3 individuals back there in Area 51 just didn't have that type of status to deem me. That it was just a personal issue, so that should have been the end of it. All they really said at that point was that it was something that they would discuss with their supervisor the following day. Then they added that it was also because of my phone calls that had just been released, and that the outside agency handling my case are the ones that actually called in and suggested it. Oh, okay, now it's making sense. It just confirmed in my mind how close they were working together. That was the other thing about this case that was a trip. The outside agency, SCCSCT, worked extremely close with the gang intel officers in that county jail. Closer than I had ever seen a jail gang intel unit work together with an outside agency ever before. It seemed like they not only shared information and worked close, but they also worked together to prosecute the case as well. In fact, the same night that this incident happened in Area 51 with the phone, Livingston came back up to the jail anticipating and hoping that this was going to be enough to push me over the threshold and convince me to cooperate. This time, they tried to be slick about it. When they pulled me out from my shower, instead of walking me back directly to my cell, they took me on a detour and put me in one of the attorney interview rooms instead. I just figured they were going to search my cell or something, so I didn't trip. As I was sitting there waiting for them to finish doing whatever they were doing, the door opened up and Livingston walked in by himself. "What's good, boxer?" This is exactly how he talked too. I said, "Same old shit, man. What brings you up here?" I knew, but I was just playing stupid. He said, "I wanted to talk to you again and see if you changed your mind." I said, "About what?" He said, "About helping yourself out." He said, "Look, man, it's obvious your boys think you're cooperating. There's no more loyalty. If you're talking to the cops, it sure ain't with us. If you want to get out of this lifestyle and help yourself, I can help you. It just depends on what you're willing to do for yourself." I said, "I already told you guys, I'm not interested, man. I'm not going to change my mind. So you're wasting your time coming up here. It's obvious that this has been your guys' plan all along. You can tell Daughtry that it didn't work." He said, "What plan?" I just told him that I was done talking and that I didn't want to talk about it. And then he left. What I meant by their plan was the phone calls that they were using against all of us. I felt like they had released my personal phone calls as a tactic in an effort to get me to cooperate. Let's release all the boxer's phone calls so his homeboys will see how he's been talking on the phone. This will get him in a wreck, and then he'll come crawling back to us until we have him eating out the palm of our hands. At least that's how I was looking at it at that time. I had no intention of cooperating with them either way, but in my mind, I just felt like they were trying to break me, and I wasn't going to allow myself to fall into their little game or plan. I probably stayed there in that observation cell for the next 14 to 16 months. And during this whole time, I fought that brown top, meaning I refused to wear it and came pretty close to getting physical with them whenever they tried to force me into wearing it. The sergeants used to force the issue and tell the COs that it was mandatory for me to wear it if I ever came out the cell. But most of the COs there didn't want to get involved and didn't even try to make me wear it. When I'd get a visit, if it was someone cool, they'd sneak me down to the visiting room and just ask their partners where the sergeant was at. If it was someone I didn't know and they tried to regulate by telling me I had to wear it, I'd just tell them to cancel my visit, that I wasn't wearing the brown top. At that time, another one of my regiment members, Eric Baby G Zarate, was housed in 2nd East, just down the tier from where I was at. And even though I was on questionable standings, he still kept an open line of communication with me. I kept sending reports back there to him and the other homeboys just to keep them abreast of everything that was happening with me. I felt like that was important. A lot of shit happened during that 16 months that I'm skipping over, but again, I'm trying to just stay focused on what was relevant to my standings. But I'm skipping over a lot. I got caught up in that murder that happened in the jail, and I got into other issues that would get me bounced around to different parts of the jail. I'm fast forwarding until somewhere around late 2006, early 2007, when another NF member by the name of Rudy Dancing Bear, or aka DB Miramontes, got transported to the county jail from Pelican Bay. By this time, they had moved me to an area in 3rd West called Little Max. It was similar to Area 51, except instead of solid doors, the tier was a little more open with bars and gates. There was 4 cells, a shower, and the TV and phone were also on roll carts. When DB got to the jail, I heard about it the same day. I was going to try to shoot a kite to him during that first week he got there, but one day during evening showers, he asked the floor officer if he could let him shower in Little Max so he could talk to me. That particular floor officer was a cool ass cat and didn't even think twice about it. I had never met DB before this and didn't even know what he looked like, but as soon as he walked on the tier, I knew who he was. There was just something about him that told me it was him as soon as I seen him. When the CO took the cuffs off him and exited the tier, DB called out to me, "Hey Box, is that you?" I said, "What's up, DB?" "Yeah bro, it's me." He said, "Man, what happened? We knew you were in the Santa Clara County Jail, but we didn't know nothing about you being back here." I said, "Yeah, I know bro, it's all bad, trust me. This isn't where I want to be either, but listen, I'm going to shoot you something over there so you can check it out. Just go through it and then get back at me." We engaged in some other small talk before they finally escorted him back to South Max across the hall from where I was at. But he understood my message, that I was basically going to shoot him a kite and all my paperwork so he could screen it. Then when he was done, to get back at me and let me know what he thought. Before he left the tier, he said 2 things, one of which would stick with me until this very day. For one, he told me to be as thorough as possible, not to leave nothing out when I sent everything over. And with regard to that, he said, "I'll look at everything and then I'll give you my honest opinion after. If there's anything I can do at that point to help you, then I will." Then the last thing he said that I still remember to this day is him saying, "Hey B, and whatever you do, man, don't make me regret this." By the next day, I had a kite drafted up that explained everything that had happened in the jail from the day that I had got there up until the present. I also shot him all the police reports and all the transcripts from the grand jury hearing. DB took about a good solid 3 days to go through everything and then sent it all back with the kite. The gist of the kite was that after reading through everything, he didn't see a reason why I should be expelled and that he didn't feel like I belonged where I was at. He countered by saying that I knew better than to be talking like that and that I was definitely going to have some explaining to do, but other than that, he couldn't find nothing that warranted deeming me no good. Furthermore, he told me that he was going to give my co-defendants 2 weeks to provide any paperwork, police reports, anything to show that I was cooperating. Otherwise, after that, he was going to tell them all to shut the fuck up and cease telling people that I was cooperating. I guess this is what he was told when he first landed in the jail. These idiots were putting it out there that I was cooperating, and this was all based on those 15 phone calls. That's it. Needless to say, none of them could produce any paperwork or police reports because there was none. He also put both Athomi and Pony on freeze pending their own investigations. Pony for the interview he gave and Athomi for lying for his primo. Twist and Roger were both deemed no good. After the 2 weeks expired, DB told me that we needed to execute a plan and find a way to get me moved back on an active tier. I wholeheartedly agreed and suggested that I start spearing PCs and doing whatever I needed to do in order to make it happen. And I said that once I started, I thought it would be best to keep it moving until we accomplished what we were trying to do. And that's exactly what I did. I knew that going back to an active tier could have been a ruse to lure me back so that they could move on me, but this was a chance I was willing to take. All I could do was keep the faith that I had been holding on to and just hope that things worked out. But even though I was determined to go back in with the positive mindset, I wasn't about to just let my guard down either. I decided that I'd go back in battle ready mode, and that I just wasn't going to go thinking that everything was good. Like I said before, people can put whatever label on me that they want, but a coward ain't one of them. How many other cats would have done that? So with regard to the administration, I became a management problem. I started spearing any and every PC that tried to walk in front of my cell. And I kept it up until they just got to the point to where they said, fuck this guy, he's causing us too many problems. They didn't know what to do with me. Aside from the chaos I was causing, DB started telling the classification gang intel officers that I didn't belong in Little Max, and that I was still on good standings with the fellas. They used to walk the tiers once a day, so whenever they do their daily walk, he started planting that seed. I started telling them the same thing from my end. I just tell them, you guys need to move me back to an active tier. I don't belong back here. At first, they just kept blowing me off, but eventually they started telling me that they were working on it, to just be patient. I honestly didn't think that they'd ever budge on it because of my profile and just because of the liability reasons. But I had to keep trying. To do nothing or to continue just sitting back there wasn't going to get me anywhere. After I started spearing some of the PCs that tried walking in front of my cell, classification eventually sent a team of officers up to Little Max to have me moved. The night they came up to move me, Gang Intel Officer Paul Cobb came to the tier and said, hey man, I gotta move you. You got people scared to walk in front of your cell. People are complaining that you've been spearing people, and we can't have that. Cobb was one of the cooler guys that worked Gang Intel, and he was someone who I had a lot of respect for. I wasn't trying to give him a hard time, and he knew that this wasn't personal. I said, it's all good, Cobb. I'll move. I don't have a problem with that. But I'm not wearing that brown top. From where my cell was positioned, I could only see about half of the tier to my right. All I could see was Cobb and two officers that were standing next to him. When I told Cobb I'd move, but I wasn't going to wear the top, he called down the tier to a sergeant and said, hey Sarge, he said he'd move, but he don't want to wear the top. Do you have a problem with walking him over there in his t-shirt? I didn't know it at the time, but that sergeant was standing there with the whole ERT team, the emergency response team. The entire hallway was lined with officers wearing full riot gear, waiting to see if I was going to need to be extracted. The sergeant said, no, that's fine. He can wear a t-shirt. I just want to get the move done. So from there, I was walked to another observation cell on the 3rd tier. I stayed there for about 3 weeks, but my classification status didn't change. But regardless of that fact, I still felt a sense of honor for having reestablished a line of communication with the homeboys again, and for also doing what I had to do in order to get off that tier. I was halfway back towards getting back on an active tier, and this was uplifting. About 2 weeks after I was moved to that observation cell, Cobb walked up to my door and said, hey man, good luck, you're going back. I don't know how you did it, because if it was up to just me, I wouldn't have done it. Then he said, congratulations, you're the only one to have ever pulled it off during the entire time that I've worked here, especially someone with your status.